is Steve Zeltzer with Pacifica, and I'm with Louis Carlet. He's with a union, Tokyo General Union Tozen in Tokyo, and he was one of the co-founders of that union. And welcome to the program, Louis.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So, Louis, why don't you talk about what's going on in Japan at this point? Your union has taken a position against the Olympics. Why don't you explain why did your union take that position, and what's the state of the labor movement and the struggle for health and safety in the midst of a pandemic and the Olympics?
Tozen Union, last year we took a strong position against holding the Tokyo Olympics. I think the reasons are pretty obvious to most people around the world. This is definitely not a safe time to be holding a large international sports event. And there's a lot of debate in Japan about whether to have fans in the stadium or not. And I think a lot of it, they're kind of missing the core issues that, first of all, it's not safe and it can't be safe. But even if it were safe, it's definitely the wrong use of resources in the middle of a global catastrophe. And so that's why that's the main reason that we just thought as a union, we have to raise our voice, which is very difficult because our own federation, Rengo, has been, for the most part, very pro-Olympics. And so we've been the lone voice among many unions within Rengo of opposing it.
And the healthcare workers union as well are very concerned because hospitals are already overcrowded and patients have died waiting to get in the hospital. What is the situation with the healthcare workers and their unions as well?
I don't know the details about the unions, but I know that the conditions for healthcare workers are deteriorating again. I've spoken to doctors and nurses, and there was a lull for a while, but now it's getting bad again. In that that they have to put more and more resources into taking care of the increasing caseload, and so it's really an incredible diversion of all these resources that are needed to what is something that would normally be something that's supposed to be fun and represent peace and prosperity. And so this is just not the time to do that. And I'm sorry I don't have much information about the healthcare workers unions, but I know that many voices among the physician community have voiced their outrage or skepticism at the very least about holding the Olympics at this time.
And we know that the Japanese government, the Abe government, have a pattern of what I would call denialism. They denied that Fukushima was dangerous, yet they still haven't removed the broken nuclear rods at the Fukushima reactors. They have over 1 million tons of water, radioactive water, that they may have to dump in the Pacific. Is this a continuation of in the comfort women? They denied what happened to the comfort women during the Second World War. Is this a continuation of the kind of denialism or reality by the Japanese government? Is that the common operating procedure?
It's definitely denial. However, I think the comfort women issue is very different from the issue of the Fukushima nuclear power plant and the current Olympic issue, in that the comfort women issue is more like a nationalist issue of denying the crimes of Japan during World War II, whereas the recent things is more about the neoliberal assault on our society. On Keidanren is the biggest business federation, and of course they represent the interests of large companies. And so basically it comes down to what everyone knows it comes down to, is that the Olympics is a major transfer of wealth from the taxpayer to a few large companies, advertisers, sponsors, companies that are related to the Olympics in one way or another. And the nationalist element at this point, I think, is the Olympics is probably going to be bad for the Japanese image. So I don't think the new Suga government, are at this point really caring so much about that. I think it's simply a matter of the corporations they represent. So
And I mean, the rollout of vaccines in Japan,
Mhm.
is this incompetence, or why haven't the Japanese public agencies, health agencies, been able to distribute the vaccines when it's been distributed in other countries around the world, advanced countries?
Yeah, this is a real question for me because they've been so intensely focused on the Olympics, and I get the feeling that the government has basically kind of been wishing it away. At the very beginning, last year, Japan closed down in April and May of last year. You may remember, and we were very close to getting to 0 cases, which of course would be a good place to start because then you just have to protect against new cases. But before they got that low, they opened up again, and we're now on I think our fourth or fifth state of emergency lockdown, and every time we go into lockdown up until now, cases have gone down, and then when we open up, they go up again. Now we're in a situation where we're in a lockdown, but they're still kind of creeping up, and they're talking about the fifth wave. So it's really a mystery why the government has not focused more attention on getting the vaccines and getting them to people. I think we're at between 10 and 20% now. I don't know the exact number right now, but it's really ridiculous. My thinking is that if they wanted to do the Olympics, why didn't they take care of the corona issue better and truly get it under control, truly get the population vaccinated? I mean, it's really shameful that the US, which had dealt with corona worse than any country, is way ahead of Japan in terms of vaccination rates. So yeah, I
And
mean, I have the same question you do. Yeah.
and the privatization going on worldwide in Japan, privatized hospitals, has that affected the ability of Japan to deal with this latest medical crisis with the pandemic?
Um, yes, I think so. And there's like I've noticed over the years that hospitals have turned from, well, hospitals who take care of patients into businesses, and we see that more and more and more. Um, that they like people who don't have the proper insurance and stuff like that. This is something that before I would only see in the United States. Now it's becoming a big issue. If you don't have insurance, they kind of try to do everything they can to talk you out of getting care at the hospital or even getting admitted. And another thing they do since Corona too is they push people off to other hospitals. And so not all hospitals deal with corona, and so there's certain hospitals, like I know one hospital, Toronomon, which is the biggest hospital, or not the biggest, it's the most prestigious hospital in Japan. They have they do handle corona cases, and they have an entire floor that's devoted only to corona cases, and they don't publicize it, so nobody knows what floor it is. I'm not sure exactly why they do that, but there's this really harsh reality. Like you said, people are waiting to get into hospitals. People are waiting for like often they're actually sent home, and that's something that before it became corporations would never have happened. People are often like they have corona, they even have symptoms, and they're told to wait at home, which is just unbelievable. And because there's just not enough beds, and because everything's been corporatized, there are not enough extra supplies laid out because it's not an efficient use of resources to maximize profit. So we see that a lot. A lot of people being turned away are told, okay, wait at home until it gets really bad, and then they go to the hospital. So I think we're going to see more and more of that as cases increase as we start the Olympics. So.
And the G7 and the Biden administration, Blinken, are supporting the Olympics. They're full-throated support. In fact, Biden's wife may be going there. So
Yeah.
the U.S. government is behind having the Olympics in the middle of a pandemic. And also, what do you see as the rise of militarism in Japan? Because Japan, while it's cutting back on social services and healthcare, is escalating increases in military budget to confront China. Do you
Yeah.
see a growing danger of war in Asia with the Asian pivot pushed by the United States?
Well, I mean, I see, of course, there's danger between the U.S. and China, and of course, Japan will, at this point, just do whatever the United States says. As far as the mood in the country, one thing I noticed is that more and more young people are becoming very active, and I read articles about an interest in Marxism, which is really interesting. Like young Japanese, when I came to Japan, a couple decades ago, young Japanese would never talk about politics, and there's kind of like famous for at least ostensibly not caring. Now, many more Japanese are starting to question the system. They're starting to read about Marxism and about previous struggles. In our union, in Tozen Union, we have a 26-year-old young Japanese woman who's very, very active and radical and devoted to the cause. And we see a lot of young activists getting very much involved. And I think it's a sign that people have had enough. And one of the great things about Japan now is that the Japanese people don't want the Olympics. Like, we see that in poll after poll. There's a recent international poll where I think it was like 70 or 80% of the Japanese said no. And that's a big improvement since the nuclear power. Nuclear power, there was some opposition, but nothing like there is now. I mean, I don't think I know any Japanese who think it's a good idea to have the Olympics.
And the future of young people in Japan, like the United States, they are not able to get good jobs. They're part-time workers, the gig economy. How has that affected Japanese young people?
Well, I mean, I think that also has been a good impetus to get more interested in activism. I get so many labor consultations, and our president also gets a lot of labor consultations from young Japanese working in, let's say, a restaurant or something, or really terrible conditions with no job security. I mean, nothing that used to be in Japan like standard, like kind of like steady employment, kind of devoted to the company and the company is devoted to you. Nothing like that anymore. But for young people, it's basically, except for a small portion of the population, most people, is just precarious employment upon precarious employment, being fired, on a whim, almost no future. And many Japanese are becoming more and more aware of the environmental crises, and I know many Japanese young people who are questioning capitalism, which is something that to me is really surprising in a good way.
And the issue of the LDP, it seems that there is no real working class political alternative in Japan. Do you see that development taking place? Because one of the reasons the LDP seems to be able to hold on to power is there's no united opposition. And you say even your union is Rengo is supporting the Olympics in the midst of this pandemic.
Yeah, well,
and
I mean,
they support the I guess the Democratic Party, or so they're supporting the main capitalist parties.
Yeah, Rengo is actually, there's 3 national centers. Rengo is the largest. It's actually not a labor union. A lot of people don't know this. It's actually an organization of labor unions. However, their clearly stated policy is cooperation with management. They take a conciliatory stance very openly. Now, when we joined, they assured us that they would not interfere in our positions, even if they were not conciliatory. And they've respected that so far. So as far as the LDP, most Japanese I know don't like the LDP, but they also don't like the alternatives. And as you said, there's no united opposition. So there's many so-called opposition parties, but they can't seem to get together. And one of the things is that everyone on the left and right seems to hate the Japanese Communist Party. So within the Diet, it's almost impossible to unite against the LDP, and the people don't trust those other parties. Like you said, it may be true that there's no truly democratic party. Not democratic. I mean, there's no true workers. There's no party that represents the interests of workers, and so people are very cynical about the parties. I know many Japanese who think politicians are all the same. And it makes sense because they don't represent their interests. They don't represent normal people, workers, small businesses. If I could segue a little bit about small businesses, that they've really been hurt as well. Like restaurants, like a family restaurant or something, they've been forced to, every time there's a state of emergency, they can't open after 8 p.m. They can't serve alcohol. And this is devastating. I mean, most little restaurants, they live on alcohol. Like that's where they get most of their income. And after 8 p.m., then what happens is that, from their point of view, like we can't do our business, but we can do the Olympics, and the media recently, the corporate media has been appealing to people. They've been pulling on people's heartstrings by saying, oh, these athletes have trained for so long and this is their one chance and we can't deprive them of that. And, of course that's true, but it's also true that everyone's lives have been upended. And, obviously the Japanese government doesn't care at all about the careers of these Olympic athletes. They care that it's going to make a lot of profit and it's going to transfer wealth from normal people, taxpayers, to their friends, in the Japanese business community. So yeah, I mean that's how I see it.
And one of the issues of the Olympics that they've been used for redevelopment, moving working class people, poor people out of their homes, and the district where the stadium was built and these housing, apparently that was a working class district that was renovated for the Olympics.
Yeah.
So it's gentrification. Did that happen in this Tokyo Olympics?
Well, I know there's a lot of so-called cleaning up of homeless people, and there's a lot of abuse of workers. And one of the most outrageous things is that even though corporations are going to make so much money, they've been calling out to so many people to become volunteers. In fact, Tozen Union was even called to be to provide interpreters and stuff like that. In other words, they want people to work for free to support this venture that's going to make increase the profits of a few super large companies. And so in the same with previous Olympics in Japan, the workers are really the workers involved with construction are treated horribly. And of course, everything is pushed aside in order to prioritize getting this event done no matter what happens. So you may have known recently that Thomas Bach of the IOC chairman, he said that the most he wanted to appeal that it's not just he wanted to pretend that it's not just corporate profits that are important. He said the most important thing is the Chinese people. I don't know if you've heard that one, right?
No.
This is a true story. He said the Chinese people, that's how it really symbolizes how out of touch these people are with people. I mean, he didn't even know what country he was in. All that he sees are the dollar signs that he and his friends are going to represent the money that he's going to make with his friends. And he so he called them the Chinese people, which became a kind of a scandal in Japan. So
okay, well, I want to thank you for joining us. We've been talking with Louis Carlet. He is the co-founder of Tozen, Union of Interpreters and others in the Tokyo General Union in Japan. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much.